Are we live? Boom. Well, here we are, talking about the future of the urban environment. All right, joining me here on stage, I'm still Nick Hawtin, your moderator. And joining me here from the far side, we've got Scott Allison from Clean, the Clean cluster here in Copenhagen. We've got Jølck, Director of Technology Investing at NREP. I'll let you talk about that in a second. And then I've got Anette Steenberg, who's Director of Investment Promotion at Copenhagen Capacity. And I think we'll just start from this end and take it back the other way. If you take a minute just to explain Copenhagen Capacity, what exactly is that, and what do you do there?
Good question. Yes, Copenhagen Capacity, we attract foreign direct investors and foreign talents to come to the greater Copenhagen area. So that basically what we do, attract the talent, attract foreign companies to come and settle here in the region.
Sure.
Yeah, so if we take NREP, so NREP is basically the largest real estate investor in the Nordics. We, for 15 years, invested into real estate buildings, but also cities. And then now we last year changed basically our strategy to also invest into companies in the real estate value chain.
Cool.
Super, but yeah, as you said, Clean, we're an environmental cluster, so the Danish environmental cluster, membership organization, so we represent the universities, companies, and public sector. And we work, and I specifically work on the international perspective, working with cities and mobilizing innovation processes to actually take these complex challenges that everyone is facing and actually accelerate action. That's what we work with, and obviously we're trying to get the Danish expertise into this.
Cool. Well, let's see. A couple of themes from today. Sustainability. One is, we've gone from the it's nice to have and, oh, if we only could do more of it, to, oh, wow, if we do it right, we can make an awful lot of money doing it. That's one. And the other is this gap, bridging the gap between strategy, oh, we ought to do something to save the planet, and then the people down here actually getting it done, and the hard work of matching them with the talent they need to meet, the investment they need to meet, the customers they need to meet, the skills they need to gain, bridging that back and forth. And you guys come at it from 3 different angles. I'd love to hear your take initially on what you see the opportunities. Let's go on, Anette.
Well, I see there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of business opportunities, a lot of profitable business opportunities in this area. And Denmark has got a lot to offer. We have a lot to showcase. We've done very well, especially within the wind area. But there's also other areas that are very potential for us to explore even further, especially within the whole urban setting, energy efficiency, climate resilience, etc. So we have a lot to offer, we have a lot to show already, but we also have a lot to learn, both of course within our nation, but also, as I mentioned, not every wheel has been invented in Denmark, so we can actually learn a lot from abroad. And we do that by attracting the knowledge and talents and companies that come here, explore, and scale later on. So that...
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I think that the challenge here is that it's been a sector which has not been in focus for many years. And now, with the Green Deal coming up, CO2 is really becoming the center of it. After George Floyd, after COVID, after Me Too, this is, the problem which, the next century will be central for us to basically solve. And I think, the fact that we are now mobilizing capital to get into this sector will be a huge opportunity. If you just take carbon removal in itself, which is representing 70% of CO2 in the urban stack, then it represents a $3 trillion opportunity, which is huge. I think fundamentally now we see a convergence between politicians, investors, and communities, and also organizations represented here at the Green Impact Week, getting together and finding a way forward.
Quick thought on this. When we talk about tech, and we talk about, let's say, investing in people working in the space, and there's the people that build houses, and a lot of that hasn't changed in a really, really long time. And so when tech first showed up in the real estate business, there was an awful lot of talk about business information, building information management. And I think, what's the next thing? Because that's been around for a while now. What are you guys seeing that's the new thing?
So there's a number of, you can say, technologies penetrating that area. So if you take just artificial intelligence as a deep tech technology that's penetrating across the value chain. So in the beginning, you're starting to see, okay, the way you do optimizing and planning of a building site in itself will be done by using artificial intelligence. So we invested into a Norwegian company called Spacemaker, which basically, if you have a site and you want to figure out how do you configure that site and use the land in the most optimal way, because that is the scarcity. That is, we only have, a number of square meters in the world, and we want to create a high density. Then they basically use artificial intelligence to predict and come up with the best 20% solutions, like in a Pareto optimal scenario, compared to basically architects and engineers using maybe 3 or 4 months figuring that out, and they can take into account all the same variables. Like this software is able to say, okay, this is where you get solar sunshine into the windows, and you get a better health. You get the rainwater in the right way in the buildings so that you don't, get flooding. So those things, is an area that we see, and you can tap that into the whole real estate value chain and into cities. So that's just one example.
Cool. Clusters. Clean is a cluster, and there's plenty of stuff to cluster in this space. Fill us in. Who do you work with both here, and then how do you work with out?
Yeah. Well, I think this is exactly what you said about this gap between the strategies and actual action. There's this middle kind of lifting
Space,
that down,
yeah.
space. This is the difficult space. And I would say this is where clusters kind of fit in. And at the moment, a lot has been done over the past 10, 20 years in terms of climate action, etc. But a lot of it's been the low-hanging fruits. It's been the easier stuff. We still have the discussions about the complex things, a bit around the building stock, as you said. And this is where, who takes that risk? Who takes that initiative to drive that? And this is where I'd see cluster as a role. We have this membership. We have the different technologies. We have access. We partner at Clean with C40 Cities, so the big global city network, and we actually drive their business connection, let's say, not like actual integration, because basically cities are very, not scared, but put off engaging too much on the business side. So this kind of neutral space to actually discuss these difficult issues and bring it down to something concrete. And I would say, within building stock, I think the interesting kind of thing is the perspective. I've been working a little bit with the city of Helsinki in some competitions, is around the whole energy system. So you look at the system as a whole, and then build in the buildings as part of that, so they can become prosumers rather than just consumers. And you start looking at different angles, and then you have a system or a system solution that is flexible enough to get the new technologies in, so you don't fix yourself in too much. And that's a difficult discussion, but very difficult.
And actually, a follow-up on that, I think you mentioned tech as the word. I think we also should use material science as a thing, because when you're saying energy, it's all about, how do you develop PV panels, how to use geothermal energy, which we have been using for a number of years, and also the most recent investment we did into a carbon capture company in Canada called Carbon Cure, that basically reduces the CO2 of concrete with more than 10%. And there, that's more about material science than, the tech that we know in the classic fashion of, consumer tech with Snapchat and Facebook and so on. So I think that's a very important notion here at the Green Impact Week, that also the things that Anette is mentioning, what's the strength of Denmark? That's actually the engineering and the material science people we also have that understand some of these challenges and how we solve them in a different way than the classic deep tech I spoke about early on.
Yeah, because one of the cool things about cities, let's say in the public sector, is the scale. As you're interested in making money, it was funny to hear an investor being excited about something that only changes the number by 10%. But it's the factor, is that the building mass, a city of Copenhagen, it's only 500,000 people that live in the actual city center, and yet the city itself owns 1,000 properties, or leases 1,000 properties. So the scale of a 1% improvement spread across that is huge. At the same time, they do have these challenges of, let's say, they can't work directly with them. There are limits to what they can do directly with the private sector because they have to be impartial. But they also have a long view. I mean, the city of Copenhagen is counting on being here for a very, very long time, longer probably than your investors are willing to wait to see a return on their investment. So there's a fun combination.
Yeah, so basically, if you take, the CO2 challenge, if we want to reach the Paris Agreement, we need to reduce, CO2 with 38 gigatons. This company that we invested into, which is attacking the concrete space, which is representing 4 gigatons of CO2, can actually reduce it with up to 500 megajoules CO2. That means, they can actually, if you look at it, take 1% of those 100% we need to reduce if they manage to get at scale, which we predict they will be within 7-8 years. So if you have 100 of those bets, you can actually get to the Paris Agreement goals, which I think is what we need to look at.
You've got 100 of those bets, but as investors, to hit that, you need to make 1,000 bets.
That is true.
But at the same time, yeah, you've got the scale if you've got the cities, and if you've got the long view.
But I would say that those components need to be put into a bigger system because the cities will not invest they don't want individual technologies. Private investors, maybe, but cities, they're looking for the bigger. Yeah. What is it? They need to deal with the energy of a building stock. So the small parts is not that interesting for them on a bigger scale. True. And that's where we work in that kind of area, trying to bridge that gap and bring in these innovative companies that are then part of something as a group. And I guess that's a bit what you were working with in terms of what you invest in. You're obviously investing in these companies to lift them up to a bigger kind of solution, let's say.
And one of the ways we are trying to support that is to attract primarily innovative startups within urban tech and to bring them to Denmark. And I know Bloxhub, they have this urban tech program where we are part of mentoring these companies coming in. And I know that right now they have a program running. It's a 3-month program. And I think there's this time around, this year, it's 8 out of 9 are foreign startups. Last year it was 8 out of 10. Yeah. So that's a great opportunity for the ecosystem to encourage, both attract, but also encourage collaboration in terms of roundtable discussions and mentoring and taking them through a process of the more innovative technologies.
It's interesting. I mean, one of the advantages that we have up here is that we're a smaller piece of the world, and so there's an awful lot of really tight connections, and so lots of these clusters, we can make these connections where, let's say urban tech, we bring in. I worked with a lot of accelerators. Not so many of them have a partner in there bringing in outside talent, helping you bring your outside talent to a particular city. Mm.
That is really one of the strongholds that we promote, not just in the urban area, but in most areas where Denmark has strongholds, this great, what we call triple helix cooperation, the cooperation between private, public, and academia. We are really, really good at that in Denmark compared to our competitors, especially the public. They are very accessible compared to a lot of other countries, and within this area, it's heavily regulated, so this close dialogue and cooperation, collaboration with the public authorities are extremely essential if they want to scale and if they want to become part of the good success and profit.
You see this across the Nordic level through the C40 collaboration between the 40 biggest or 40 leading cities in this space. You see it globally. What do you see in terms of this triple helix thing, where you see some of the advantages, some of the interesting things to watch for? Trends?
So I basically fundamentally believe that the Nordic countries obviously offers a lot in terms of sustainability, as you started out with, and there we are taking, some of the leading steps in the world. But there's no doubt about, if we don't do events like the Green Impact Week or we don't have the Alliance as C40, we cannot on a massive scale move this fast enough, because the biggest bottleneck we have here is time. And that is basically therefore we need to come together. So I think that is how I see it. And obviously we have a number of crises around the world, which is challenging a little bit what we're talking about here, sustainability, that becomes a priority. But I'm actually optimistic about the fact that now we see politicians and investors and corporations actually moving in that direction, because we know it's something which is, the train has left the station.
Yeah.
Now we need to get together.
Well, I was going to say, like the Green Impact Week, things like this help with the distribution challenge, right? The future is here, that the answer is out there somewhere. Usually it's already been invented, it's not evenly distributed. It's stuck inside a laboratory at a university, or some of these things are just so low tech. I remember one of the things that blew my mind when I moved here was the children's dentist, the dentist is at the school. I forever grew up being picked up by my parents and driven to the dentist and then driven back from the dentist to school. And oh, wait, instead of moving 600 children, you're moving the dentist. Pretty smart. But that's not the normal way that it's done in the rest of the world. There's so much of this stuff that's...
But I think it comes back to, we now start to see data really penetrate what we call the urban tech stack. So basically using data across that to plan how we develop cities, how we do regeneration of cities. And that is the fundamental thing that we need to look at in this century, how to use data in the urban stack to make things better.
I love it. You come back to that. I'd love to hear an example of that. Just thinking with the global, what do you see happening in other cities?
I guess, all cities are having the same issues. Even if it's somewhere that's hot, they have the urban heat island effects, that so much can be transferred from colder countries dealing with colder. It's the same kind of systems, heating, cooling. And I actually think they are opening up to these, a bit more to the actual dialogue and actually understanding they cannot just put out tenders and procurement and say, this is what we want to do. They need to engage before that and actually understand where the technology is at, where is it going, because investment in cities is 5-10 years behind the technology, and then it doesn't make sense in the long term, and we're never going to meet the targets that's been set. So to kind of accelerate that, and I think they are opening up to that. I think it's a bit too slow as well, but it's getting that initial trust and understanding that the companies are not just they're there to make money, but they're not there just to make money. They're there to give a contribution into something that has a meaning. And I guess, come across a lot of startup companies, they have more than just profit as their
the double
agenda
bottom
points.
line,
They
the
have
triple bottom line.
Yes. So I think that's maybe the public sector is not maybe aware of that so much, that there is different ways of engaging in that ecosystem. And they don't need to lead everything.
When we're looking at companies that want to come here, what are they? When we mentioned data just before, and I'm coming back, you're getting an extra minute to think of some good cases. I was thinking, the companies that come here in this, let's see, for the city. IoT was the buzzword that was killing us all a couple of years ago. But we do have really good data. One of the things the Nordics is really good at is counting things and knowing things about its citizen. What do you see the things, what's attracting people here?
Well, the data is definitely one of them. We have great data sets. The challenge sometimes is getting access to it. It's not always that easy, but we have great data sets. But otherwise, I do believe it's the collaboration spirit. It's the opportunity to test things here. It's our whole framework conditions and also the policy environment and governance structure we've set up. Yale Law School just came out with their environmental performance index this week, where Denmark became #1 out of 180 countries. And one of the reasons why we scored so high on the sustainability area is because we have very ambitious political targets, we have strategies, we have governance, and yes, we still need to deliver and meet the targets, but it is a fundamentally importance that we have these structures in order. And as Copenhagen, also municipal, has this very ambitious target about 2025 CO2, it's going to be very difficult. But having that target, it also pressures them to change a lot. So I see our governance, our collaboration, our data set definitely are some of the reasons why and of course also because we have shown the world that we also walk the talk within the green area and sustainability.
50% of us commute by bicycle, and yeah. Cool. Data sets. Boom, you're on.
So, obviously I'm very passionate about specific companies, so that's what I'm going to use as an example. We can always talk at it at metadata. But fundamentally, take an example of a Danish company called Nordsense, which just raised money. They are basically, providing a way of emptying bins in a smart way, where they have an IoT device, basically figuring out, do you empty air, or do you actually empty a bin which is full? Meaning that, you optimize both, the mobility, reduce the CO2. They've done some tests that you actually reduce the number of people who are killed in traffic by these haulers driving around. So there's a number of knock-on effects if we start to optimize and using all the data layers that we have in the urban stack and figure out, okay, how do we design our cities? How do we regenerate them? How do we plan them? So the data privacy issue there is very interesting.
Yeah. Sure, and that's a great one, because I'll tell you what, there's a bunch of us in the space that have been making fun of IoT for the longest time, because it was, cool. Apart from garbage cans and traffic lights, what else is IoT doing in cities? Ha, 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 ha. And then, of course, eventually it's finally reached the point where now there is enough data where, okay, fewer garbage trucks. And then you also have the combination of a city saying, yeah, all right, well, we actually want to use this data. Because I've seen similar things in, let's say, the gas station business, with the trucks driving around filling up gas stations. And it turned out that the companies that were driving the gas around, they're like, listen, we drive through that neighborhood on Monday. Whether the truck's full or it's empty, doesn't matter. And it's like, oh, okay, that doesn't matter. But if you do have a data set that's big enough, and you've got a city that's saying, we care and we want this applied, then the business case is actually there, because there is a need.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's something that, at least the Nordics, Denmark, is strong. It has a good data set. Whether it's used enough, but it has that, and elsewhere in the world they don't. This is something that they can learn from us here, how this is being tested and how we start to use this data, because it's fundamental in making these basic decisions. How we live, it defines.
Yeah, and obviously, if we want to tackle the energy challenge that you talked about, then, the IPCC report came out and said, okay, 36% of that needs to come from energy efficiency. We have a number of very interesting Danish solutions on that, low-tech, like insulation, windows, heat pumps, and so on. But a number of other, you can say, IoT devices are also coming into that space. Take, for example, there's two companies in the US called 35F and Passive Logic, the latter one we invested into. They are basically able to reconfigure an existing building for $1,500, putting up IoT devices and then reducing the energy efficiency between 30 and 35%. They've done 29 pilots. Great investors just came on board. We're scaling the company. That is, an example of where you can actually also input products and then generate data, and then we make use of that in those areas. 75F, which is the competitor, which is backed by Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Bill Gates Fund, is basically very large in India, because that's a huge problem with energy efficiency, and then they generate the data and they figure out how do they optimize the building stock. So that's an example of we need to still generate data while we use what is being created.
Sure, you said something like it's like windows. Is that right? I think when I grew up with Danish Velux windows, these windows that you have in the roof of a building, and they flip down and what. And I never really thought about them until I lived in a house that had an off-brand. It was not a Velux window. And lo and behold, for the 20 years my parents lived there was always that leak. And they'd fix the leak, and they'd have it painted over, and the leak would come back. So Denmark's leading in a couple of these and they're also incredibly thick windows. They've been sort of thermally, when you look at the thermal picture of the roof, it's the coldest part of the roof is the window. Counterintuitive. So there's a bunch of these solutions from up here that started here, scaled to the rest of the world. Cool. I'm thinking about universities, famous. I've worked with a lot of scientists on innovation projects, and I say innovation because it can be so hard to get their knowledge out of the laboratory and into, because lo and behold, they're more interested in research than they are in necessarily making products. That's something that we're actually pretty good, that challenge is one that we're pretty good at solving here in the Nordics. And I was wondering, do we see, let's say, education talent, let's say professors, researchers coming in from out of the world, from the rest of the world into the region in this space? And with you, I was wondering, I would love to hear a couple of the examples, because there've got to be some good ones from the Clean cluster.
I mean, we would love to have a lot of talent within this area. One of the investments, but that's not talent, well, it is competence, is we've managed to get Fraunhofer here. Fraunhofer is situated at Bloxhub, and they came here to
and just, for those that don't know, it's like one of the world's premier technological institutes, based out, as the name indicates, from Germany.
Correct. And they came here because they were very excited about what was going on in the whole urban development in Copenhagen. So they came here to be part and to enter into strategic partnerships And they're perfectly placed in BlocksHub where they interact with a lot of both smaller and bigger companies. So we're very happy that they were here because that brings a lot in terms of prestige and knowledge and publications.
Cool.
Yeah, I think specifically on this kind of things coming out of universities, and there's so much kind of exciting. We work very strongly with DTU, with their Skylab. And
the Technological University of Denmark.
Yes. And we work a little bit with their Skylab kind of...
when the Skylab
which is like an innovator, like research where things coming out of universities, students that have ideas, they have a test bed, and they get access to kind of mentors, etc. But we've been working a little bit, and there was a company that I was there that was being presented that has this idea of taking waste products and developing these cube-like buildings for developing countries, which then can be purchased using this kind of more digital currency. So he's combining so many different things. And that's interesting as a concept. It's interesting for the company to scale. And they're looking for this access into these different markets. And this is where I met the guy, and it was just like, we have a cluster partner in South Africa who works doing the same stuff we do in Denmark out there. So we have direct links into the universities that are doing tests in Africa. How can we lift this and move this forward and get the actual interesting partnerships together? And I think universities are very good at that, but they also are a bit behind, like stuck in doing their research. And how do they get access to these opportunities? They don't know this, like what's happening.
Yeah. So I've been lucky for many years ago to sit on the board of a university, one of the largest ones in Denmark, and really saw, the incredible educational system we have in Denmark. But I also, maybe even though I'm a Dane, a little bit, American in my approach, that I actually believe that we don't create the right incentives for people in the population, and now it becomes very policy-oriented, to go out and found their own companies. I fundamentally believe that is something we as a country, in terms of Denmark, needs to really look at how do we incentivize that even better. Fundamentally, because if we want to create the next generation of industrials, which are plus 1,000 people as it's being discussed right now in the media, and we see companies like Unity IPOing in California, and we wanted to have them back here, even though it's Danish founders, I think we really need to consider, like some of the serial entrepreneurs who are now in politics are saying, that how do we optimize for that if we want to bring, the next wave of companies locally here?
I say one of the benefits I was going to say is that we've got them in Parliament, which is really good. You mentioned DTU.
I just have a quick point on the startup kind of scene. I think there's a lot of support in Denmark for that, but I think the next step, scale up, is the issue in
for sure
the Nordics. It's how do you move that up to the next level?
Yeah, and obviously, it's idea generation, seed level, all those things is amazing. Actually, we transformed that in the way we've done with the movie industry, with the restaurant scene and so on, and building a competence level. I think so also in that space. But on scalability, I totally agree with you that we need to find a way for people actually thinking, okay, I spent 10 years of my life or 15 years of my life building this company because I truly want to make a difference.
Yeah. This is super big. Quick note on DTU. DTU has an interesting approach in that, you see, looking at the Scandinavians, the Swedes, for example, are very organized, and they often make fun of Denmark for being a little bit more loose. And DTU is a fun example where you mentioned Skylab, but you didn't mention Scion DTU or FutureBox. They've got lots of different programs that seem to compete with each other, but that have slightly different offers that appeal to slightly different people out there, which is actually a good idea, because it's so hard to get them out of the lab sometimes, so different opportunities appeal to different people. With Copenhagen, something that in the built environment that really appeals is we make visible the benefits of a sustainable, clean environment. I mean, when I moved here 20 years ago, the harbor, and I mean all my childhood, I've come here all my life, the harbor was this dead industrial space. And now, when you have a good summer, like last summer or pieces of this summer, it turns out it's the place everybody goes to. And for investors like you in property, waterfront property is always interesting, but like waterfront property with life and with vibrant, wow, that's super interesting. And it's a really, really visible benefit. When you ask anybody in Copenhagen, what have you gotten out of, well, what do you think? Are you pro or anti the environment? Even the people that don't really care, when asked, are like, oh yeah, that harbor thing, that was really good.
But I want to comment on that, because what we have done in NREP is basically we have developed a new part of the city called Northern Harbor. And fundamentally what we saw there was that we looked at other places around cities in Europe, what has actually been done. That's by the, you can say, the waterfront. And we thought, okay, what happens is basically that you have a number of sites and plots, and those are sold to individual developers who just actually want to earn a dime or money. And the fundamental problem with that is that you start with all these architects designing, how it should look like, the life, and you see all the great drawings, and then you end up in a city or a part of the city where there's no life.
It's sterile.
And what we did was we basically set up a joint venture with the city and port to fundamentally design, okay, how do we do this? So what we do is we actually manage the way that this product is designed, because fundamentally Northern Harbor is a 100-year product. We're not going to change that in 100 years. So we control, the ground floor. Okay, here needs to be a bakery, here needs to be a restaurant, here needs to be a flower shop. These are the groceries. So we basically design it to optimize it for life. And that's much more than, just earning a dime on that. That's also contributing to creating a city. And on top of that, we build you can say a dogma with 5, sustainability principles and so on. So trying to give more than just, setting up a city. We really need to think of that as a broader platform.
And there's a lot of people that say, one of the things you often get when you go outside of Europe, outside of the Nordics is, oh, it's easy for you, yeah, but you're organized different. Oh, well, you've got all these advantages ahead of. I'm like, no, when I moved here 20 years ago, there were 3 places in all of Copenhagen where you could buy a cup of coffee and see the harbor. It was dead. So yeah, it takes a little bit of vision, bit of trust, which is something we have up here.
And cooperation.
And cooperation, right? Exactly when you say, Donald Trump is a real estate developer. Collaboration with the public sector, I don't quite see that happening.
But I also think when you look at Danes, they are sometimes called the goody two-shoes of the EUs in terms of actually implementing the regulations being made in Brussels. So even though the Swedes might call us the Mediterranean of the North, which I'm probably sure they're right about, we are very diligent and we actually comply to when regulations are made. So I think when we set these very ambitious targets, we will meet them. And hopefully we will meet them in time. But I have no doubt, and you can also, I'm very impressed with the Danish private sector, how companies, they have really, really taken this seriously and are pursuing the very, very ambitious targets, and they're just doing it. And being these front runners just also creates a fantastic energy and put pressures also on the public sector, and the public sector put pressure on the private sector. So I think that's really something special when you look at the EU. We're very good at actually making the targets we set.
This long view is unusual, and I chuckled a bit about seeing somebody from the finance background excited about 10% returns.
That is not a 10% return, but 10% reduction in the 10% CO2.
Reduction, exactly. I'm so used to, let's say, London, New York, 100%, et cetera, and the quick dollar, and this look at the long money. There has to be a trust that the money will be around there for you to take it out at the end. That the tax man won't come along and say, ooh.
Yeah, I think, we've been long-term for the last 15 years, our funds is 10 years. We're now coming with you can say, an evergreen structure, which is just running for good. So we are long-term in what we do. And take some of the examples of the projects we've done. We have installed, before anyone else, the largest PV panels on all logistics centers in the Nordics because we wanted to go 100% renewable. We have dug down in Finland 1.6 kilometers to basically make a geothermal energy source for our logistics centers. Out here in Copenhagen, we've developed some resource rows where we basically have used upcycled concrete and materials. All of these things before the industry did any innovation, and where we took, you can say, some of our money and invested into doing something which we fundamentally believe needs to be solutions for the long term. Sacrificing that we need to find creative ideas on coming up with ways to return our investors' money. And we have actually then also been lucky to return the investors' money as one of the best ones in the world at the same time, which I think actually talks to the point that there's a commercial opportunity in both, generating money and, building something which is sustainable.
And I would just add to that actually we have experienced financial investors, financial institutions, investors' interest in our ESG investment. So
ESG, help people out.
Environmental, socially, society. So you could say SDG investments within the finance world, so that pension funds, they invest green, sustainable, instead of maybe in oil and the more black industries. That is increasing a lot. And specifically, I know that there are, from the US, financial institutions that are really looking into how we're doing it here. So I believe also financial institutions and the big money, they are looking and they're turning their investments more and more into the ESG investments.
Seeing this across the clusters, across other cities.
Yeah, I think the money is there. The investment to do this.
You got some examples of stuff maybe you facilitate, because
we're working a lot. Well, now we're talking about the EU Green Deal is out there. There's a lot of incentive there. There's a lot of money there that's for this kind of difficult discussions. This is where we position ourselves as a cluster. We can take that role and take that drive and accelerate an initiative and bring in the right people into the room so other people can do it as such. But one of the examples, we worked with C40 and we run this program for them, the City Solutions platform. It was in Sydney. They basically wanted to make the city of Sydney 100% renewable by 2030. So the city, not the broader
right, but the city of Sydney, Australia, renewable.
And we mobilized and did this 2-day workshop and 6-month process, and we got the 2 of the 3 biggest energy companies in the room for the first time.
Which company?
Energy supply companies.
Because this is one of the world's largest coal exporting countries.
And they got into the room with the city, with some other companies, kind of mobilized, and they basically had $10 million to implement this, which would do 0.1%. It's nothing. But they have actually managed to develop a business model together with some of the bigger players. And I heard this summer, they actually met the target for the city to be 100% renewable.
In 2020.
And it all established from this initial dialogue, getting the right people in the right room, and if they both see the benefits, away it goes. It'll be very quick.
I think it's all about mindset, as you say, because I looked at an investment last week, and that was one that was transforming the parking value chain, which, first of all, I thought, okay, it doesn't have any sustainability footprint. It's going to be a great investment.
Just to say, the parking value chain.
Yeah, so when you drive in a parking lot in a public space, and there's so many systems out there, there's different things to interact with and so on. And coming back to, basically my point is, it was not sustainable. I couldn't really see it make a difference. I would definitely get my money back. But I said, okay, that's for others who like, to have those principles of investments. Yeah. If I want to do something, I want to use my capital to do something good in the world. Yeah. So I think it's all about the mindset that you bring the right people together to get this movement going.
Cool. Well, listen, only got a couple of minutes, so it's going to wrap up. But I want to wrap up with build on, let's say, some of the advantages here. Yeah, because it's all about, let's say, so you're leveraging people, you're leveraging money, you're leveraging knowledge. So with the big opportunity in mind, if we go back 20 years, Denmark was, oh yeah, you guys do that thing with those little windmills. Now, windmills isn't so much of a little thing. So if we take the long lens, we're looking 10, 20 years out, and we're looking at next year's Green Impact Week. Who should we have? Who should, Human and Anette and Rasmus, who should we be bringing to the table for next year? What's the big opportunity that we might not have noticed, might not have talked about? Who do we need to be bringing together to take advantage of the next windmill, the next big thing? And I'll let you guys volunteer to go first. Because I saw your terror-stricken face. Oh my God, don't pick me. But what you got? Who should we bring to the table for the next go-around?
I think, we have to start looking at what evolves over the next year, first of all, because I think things will move much more rapidly than we think so. And then I would actually bring
The next
forward-
one of these is in June, right? June or May? Exactly. So let's say 9 months. So
9 months.
We've
All
already accelerated 3
Good to
months
know.
right here.
I need to be better informed then. But fundamentally, I believe that we should showcase some of the examples that we potentially have been speaking about here who show the way forward. That's one thing. And then I think we can even, broaden the spectrum of international people that we bring from different geographies. That would be my 2 cents. And obviously, I'll make sure to share the network I have with the organizers.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think maybe next year or maybe even further in the future, I think obviously circularity is the big discussion in all industries, and the sharing economy. There's some really cool examples of initiatives that are starting to drive that and actually closing the loop and building upon each other's.
All right. Oh, I'd love to catch that one. Because you mentioned garbage cans, measuring the contents of garbage cans before. And if there's something, oh my God, that was the IoT use case we never wanted to hear again. You say sharing economy, 99 out of 100 people hearing that out on the internet right now are going, no more Airbnb, we've been there, and I've tripped over more than enough of those stupid scooters. So when you say sharing economy, what do you, let's say the next step in, what's beyond scooters and apartments?
Let's say the ownership of things will change as a concept. Obviously, there's still buildings, you still have everything, but rather than owning, let's say, you use it when you use it. It's like a service.
Yeah.
So obviously, mobility is the big example, Uber and stuff, but why not connect to everything? I know it's happening in Sweden a little bit, where you can get access to the bus, to rental car, to whatever, and it's just in one place. It's a service for you. You don't need to know where that comes from. Maybe you do want to know where that comes from. I don't know.
Sure.
And that's the same with energy production, water production. People will be a bit more involved in what's happening, and that's the accessibility of data and the IoT and actually understanding. And obviously that's about communication. So I'd recommend getting people on here who can talk about that.
Cool. And I was going to say, I can actually see the finance guy getting interested in ES platforms and sharing and commoditization of. Yeah, cool. Who should we get on next year?
Next year, in 6-7 months?
Exactly.
I think there's so many exciting areas. Now the EU Green Deal is starting. We have our own Greater Copenhagen Green Deal we want to throw ourselves at, where you have climate resilience as something that is definitely an area I believe we need to look more into. But whether we'll be ready in 6-7 months' time, I don't know. Another exciting area where we haven't really cracked the nut yet is the circular economy. I believe we have a fantastic example in Denmark, out in Kalundborg, where there's a whole life science, it's Novo Nordic, Novozymes, where basically once company's waste becomes energy, fuels into another company's product. So the whole circular economy, I believe, is very exciting also going forward. But whether it's ready in 7 months, I don't know.
Well, let's see. I'm sure that when you mentioned, we've got some good examples. You mentioned Kalundborg there. We've got some time to work with. We just need to hurry up. All right. Well, cool. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And thank you very much to my panel. This was good fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.